New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
Free my mind, open my heart with the whispers of truth, to live a conscious life, to live a conscious life on the growing edge, on the growing edge.
And now, here's Allie.
Hello, I'm Allie Benjamin, and today on Growing Edge Live, I'm honored to welcome back Reverend Joy Fletcher. We had a beautiful conversation back in October, I think. Her ministry and the deep lineage of divine science that lives through her work was the foundation of our conversation. And today I feel called to continue that conversation, but from a more personal and tender place. Reverend Joy is a fifth-generation truth student, an ordained divine science minister, president of the Divine Science Ministers Association. That's a bit of a tongue twister for me. And a beloved New Thought leader. She has served in Unity communities, taught across several spiritual organizations, and offered sacred service in countless ways. But what feels especially meaningful for today's conversation is Joy's ministry at the thresholds of life. With nearly 2 decades of hospice work as a bereavement coordinator, chaplain, volunteer coordinator, end-of-life educator and practitioner, and a grief recovery methods specialist, Joy has accompanied individuals and families through some of life's most sacred and tender passages. And I recently found myself standing at one of those thresholds. My mother was diagnosed with acute leukemia. Only 7 weeks later, she was gone. I had the profound and unexpected gift of spending the last month of her life with her. I helped care for her. I sat with her. I listened, and I watched her body change. And I witnessed her courage, her vulnerability, and her humanity in a way I never had before. I noticed significant shifts in my own heart and in my own mind as I sat with her in that tender place. And as so many families know, illness does not happen in a vacuum. It often arrives in the middle of complicated relationships, old patterns, unspoken pain, and imperfect communication. My 2 sisters and I were navigating our own family dynamics, loving our mother, wanting to do right by her, and at times struggling to understand each other, communicate clearly, or move together with ease. Then one evening, as I was helping my mother get ready for bed, she died very suddenly in my arms. It was shocking, it was holy, it was heartbreaking, and it was intimate. It was love in one of those most raw and sacred forms. So today, I want to talk with Joy about what it means to stand at the threshold of life, death, grief, family, forgiveness, and love. How do we show up when life changes so quickly? How do we stay present when we are scared? How do we companion the dying without losing ourselves? How do we grieve honestly without spiritually bypassing our humanity? And how do we honor love when family dynamics are imperfect and unfinished? Reverend Joy, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I extend my condolences, and my heart is open to you today. Thank you for sharing this sacred space and this sacred opportunity to speak with you today.
Yeah, it was really, unexpected when you and I arranged for this episode. Now I'm sitting here thinking the universe had a hand in all of this.
Always.
That something divine is actually occurring. And I've been in this this space, which as a minister myself, I'm aware of the tender, sacred space when someone loses someone or is challenged with something very difficult. That there can be, especially for us spiritual type, this time feels more mystical, more magical. Mm-hmm. And there can be some sort of magical, thinking that goes along in these times where we reach for maybe place more meaning into things. Yeah. Now, I don't see it that way. I think there is more meaning, and we are, maybe the veil is thin, that maybe these are mystical and magical moments. But I always like to sort of put in there this, chance that it's not that, because there could be people watching or listening that think, oh, there goes one of those spiritual, mystical thinking people. And so I just want us to hold both of those things, that, yes, some of us read more meaning into sacred moments like this. Mm-hmm. So Joy, as I share this tender part of my own story, I feel how much wisdom your life and ministry hold around death, hospice, grief, and sacred presence. Mm-hmm. When someone receives a sudden diagnosis and a family realizes that time may be very short, what do you most want them to know?
That they're stronger than they think. That love exists beyond our physical body. And it's a time for our own, not only to care for our loved one and be fully present. However, we can't be fully present if we're not willing to consider our own mortality and how precious life is. And it's also an opportunity for healing of relationships, not only with the person that is ill and looking at the end of this physical incarnation, and as well as with the family, perhaps, and friends. And also, I would acknowledge that grief comes through many things in our lives, not just when someone eventually leaves their physical form, but the process, or the grief of the sense of not being able to do what you had planned to do, unfinished plans as well as unfinished business. And that could be emotionally, and forgiveness. And that there always is hope that, again, I want to emphasize that we're stronger than we often give ourselves credit for.
Yeah, I can really relate to that. I've always had a sense of a little bit of fear around being in the presence of, like, for instance, we had a cat that became ill, and this was years ago now, but I was really apprehensive to be with that Whisker, our cat, because I was scared of, I don't really know what it was, but I was scared of seeing him in pain. I was scared of some unknown that seems very old, like a child, a childlike fear of death. But I went into it consciously. I forced myself to be with him, to lay with him. And in that instance, I sort of faced my fear, and I found that I was stronger than I realized. And I found that I was so happy that I could actually be there for him. And also to model that for my children, because as a mother of children that are watching to see how parents cope with things like death, and I felt that responsibility, or a bit of pressure there. And then again with my mother, which is such a bigger experience than being with Whisker, And years of sitting with people that are near the end as a minister and counseling those that have had their own journey with grief.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a lot more experience with it. So I was more prepared this time with my mother. And I also found that I found a strength. I found that when I stayed, when I didn't retreat emotionally or psychologically or physically, but I stayed. That seems to be a theme with awakening. It's staying. And as I stayed with her and got outside of my own fear, my own narrative of what was actually happening, and really was present, I dropped some of those barriers that had been in my relationship with my mother in the past. At 64, I've had a long 64 years with her.
Yes.
And so there has been a lot of ups and downs. But in those last weeks, I found something shifted in me to where I had a greater empathy, compassion, bandwidth to overlook some of my child wounds, my stories that I had, woven in and out of throughout my life within the family. And none of that was as important.
Right.
What seemed most relevant, and this was the shift, was I did not want my mother to suffer alone. Her biggest fear was being alone.
Mm-hmm.
And something in me, like this, I'm writing a book at the moment called Her Wings Appeared. And it was a wings appeared moment where something in me rose up and said, I want to be this loving presence. I want to be my mother's daughter here. That's beyond the history, beyond the stories, beyond any of that. I want to sort of blend my minister heart with my daughter heart, with the wings that were appearing, and be there for her no matter what. And so I'm sure you have maybe felt some of these feelings yourself, or maybe witnessed family members find their strength at the end, or maybe put aside differences or grievances. And so I'd like to just go into that a little bit. How has what I shared, how have you witnessed that within your ministry and within yourself?
So many experiences over the years that I'm starting to feel emotional about it. I am so grateful to have walked with other people and been at the bedside of others that from maybe someone is admitted to hospice, or they get a diagnosis and they may not look like they're ill. And so sometimes there's that misunderstanding. I just wanted to say that sometimes people don't understand a hospice diagnosis and qualification. However, to walk with people, to listen, just to be present, knowing that it's not my job to fix the relationships. It's not my job to change things, but rather to just be present. In my own life, when my late husband committed suicide, his family felt a great deal of shame. And then that was reflected to how they treated me as well as my sons. And that was a loss, not only losing my husband at a young age, he was just shy of 50, as well as the close relationships we had. And so sometimes that dynamic happens, that there are other conditions like that. I've been there at the bedside, mostly in the hospital as, I guess, a mediator, that maybe a physician said that their loved one, there was nothing further they could do. So they wanted to remove life support. And often that brings up some real high emotions for everyone. And so to just be there present, present the facts, what the physician said, and talking about what they perceive was best for their loved one. And sometimes that took a bit. And then it was so incredible to be in the room when the life support is removed, and you can still hear the sound, unfortunately, of the machine as things are changing. And then once that individual crosses over, it's just the feeling in the room is just powerful. And there seemed to be less tension between the families, and just kind of a relief. Sometimes when someone is lingering, as we call it, actively dying, where they've shown symptoms for a while and looks like they're sleeping for quite a while, I do provide education about the different stages, as compassionately as I can, and also encourage them to consider what they say at the bedside or outside the room, because it's very obvious that people do hear. That's one of the last senses that goes as they're actively dying. They hear. How else would you explain when someone says to their loved one, "It's okay to go. I don't want you to," maybe saying that, but I will be okay, or I promise I'm going to watch Dad, or whatever. And that doesn't mean that it's Hollywoodish that person then takes their last breath, but it seemed to be the message they needed to hear, that know that everyone was going to be all right. I've noticed that sometimes loved ones don't wait or don't take their last breath when their loved one is there, but maybe they'll wait when they go get something to eat or go home for the night. And that often opens up a conversation later when I would provide grief support about, was your mother protective? Do you think that she didn't want you to see her take the last breath? Or I'll say something like, sometimes it seems that your loved one wouldn't want that to be the last memory that you have, is them taking their last breath. When my grandmother, Fletcher, was in the last week of her life, I flew out to California to be with her because I thought she was going to a nursing home. And then I got there and there were a bunch of family dynamics. And my siblings didn't feel that they could be there, be present. So truly, I was in a situation I had never been before. This is before I began working in hospice. And it was scary and sacred, and I was matter of fact at times, which, as I look back, was amazing. And I know what that was. It was Spirit's guidance. I mean, all the way to all of a sudden I started talking to her about how she wanted this to go. How did she want to go to the nursing home? And someday when she crossed over, what did she want, and kind of service and so forth and so on. And it was just so direct and everything. And we didn't have that kind of relationship before.
Mm.
So like that, to be so direct and open. I always regarded her as very, she had a warmth to her, but she was just very matter of fact. And so maybe I was modeling her then. And I would call my siblings and give them an update and things like that. And then I went outside for a few minutes and I sat at a picnic table enjoying that absolutely gorgeous California day. And someone had left a newspaper. And so I just picked it up, started flipping through it, and then I saw an advertisement for a funeral home. And it was called Chapel of the Roses. Well, my great-grandmother's nickname was Rose. We knew her as that. And I knew that was very significant to my grandmother, too. So eventually, that's the funeral home that I work with. And then later, she was cremated. Well, I was there with her for the week, and I had to go home at a certain day. And so there was a part of me that wanted to be at her bedside, because of the idea that I didn't want her to be alone. I didn't understand that. And yet I remember she would look up at the ceiling at times as the week progressed and look up and then not go like this, shake her head, no.
Mm.
So filling in the blank, my story is she was telling them I'm not ready because I've had enough experience that there are other people that they're on the other side that come to be there, be a presence, whether you call it an angel, an ancestor, whatever. There's just too many experiences for me to deny that. So when I drove up the coast, took my flight home, and then that night, during the night, I had a dream about her. And I saw her in the dream, and she looked exactly like she looked when I left, which was incredible. That week, she kept transforming, that she actually looked like my great-grandmother at the end. It was just incredible. So I saw that, and then in the dream, timeline went backwards.
Mm.
And I would see her, a couple of years before, decades before when I was a child. And then I saw a wedding gazebo. And I cannot swear that was her, but it seemed like she was in that. And she was dressed in a wedding dress. And then I heard the song from Titanic, My Heart Goes On.
Mm.
And then in real life, the phone rang, and it was the hospital telling me that my grandmother had just died.
Mm.
So to me, that's a powerful story, that we're always connected with our loved ones, always. And any sense of the wounds, the conversations that didn't have, becomes smoother. And that's really helped me a lot, and to be present for others, during the grief period, the bereavement period.
Mm. I'm feeling into all that you said, and really getting a sense that there is a blessing in being, with a loved one, or around, during that sacred time, whether it's, a short amount of time or a longer period of time, and that there is some things to pay attention to, such as your grandmother shaking her head, or, that, and so I too have heard stories. My husband was a hospice chaplain,
Mm-hmm.
and people I've spoken to that have been with their loved ones or walked out of the room, and that was when the time that the loved one chose to leave at that moment. What do you make of all of that? Like, we don't talk about this very often in regular everyday conversations. People talk more about it when they're going through it. But what do you make of the fact that the veil is thin? You know, this idea that our loved ones are close, or it seems like people that are close to the end of their life have dreams or conversations or seem to ask particular questions or want to make apologies, or there's something very relevant about this time for people and the mystical component of it, and what this does for those left behind. Can you talk a little bit, or maybe give a story about when the veil has been thin, or when a family member has healed something with a dying loved one?
Yes. I have had individuals say to me, I can't think of a specific example right now, where they feel differently about their loved one than prior years. There had been conflict. And some people say that it was a blessing that their loved one didn't die suddenly, that they were able to spend time and see things differently. Maybe they saw their parent as vulnerable instead of maybe a harsh experience that they might have had growing up. I've heard spouses say that. And as far as the veil, sometimes people and they say to me, they may start the conversation, you might think this is strange, but I had this I had this experience, and I swear that my so and so was there. I could smell their cigarettes, or I thought I saw them in the corner of my eye. Do you think I'm crazy? Sometimes people will say that, and some people will attach that to something like seeing a cardinal that just keeps coming back, or a blue jay, or they keep noticing something that their loved one liked, maybe a billboard message or something like that. Yeah, there are just so many things. And to me, that's comforting to know it's an affirmation that we are not alone. Our loved ones, their essence is with us. And we can still have conversations and healing with them in our heart, in our mind. Sometimes I introduce different rituals for someone to release their loved one, maybe a release. There's a completion forgiveness letter that I've adapted from Grief Recovery Method, where the letter will start, let's say, Dear Mom, I'm writing this letter because there's some things that I want to tell you. And sometimes they'll start out with the harshness, the unfinished business. Maybe they felt cheated that their loved one died so fast, or, how challenging it was to take care of them. And then the next part would be, I want you to know, and then say things that are positive. Like, I remember the time you made a special birthday cake for me when I was 8 years old. And the time that we went to the beach and I saw you laugh when you put your feet in the water, or something like that. And then at the end of the letter say, well, I have to go now, for now, and release it. And then sometimes people will just write it like a journal, a journal kind of letter. And I encourage that they release those letters, to release the energy, maybe either burning the letter shredding it, tearing it up. Some people have put it in an envelope and put it in the mailbox. Of course, it's not going to get mailed, but just the symbology, or bury it, in pieces and things. And there's just something within our nature that craves rituals and that idea of releasing those feelings.
Beautiful. Yeah, I'd like to talk a little bit more about some of the rituals and the things that you offer your clients and loved ones to support them through what happens afterwards. We're going to take a really short break, and we'll be back and talk more with Joy about these tender and sacred moments.
Please help us say thank you to all of our organizational sponsors, including the... Please help us say thank you to all of our organizational sponsors, including the Hepperlin Foundation, New Thought Media Network proudly presents... Please help us say thank you to all of our organizational sponsors, including the Come expand your spiritual journey. Join us for Just the Talk, Sundays, 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. Mountain Time. Experience Unity Kitchener and Ottawa. Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Unity of Garden Park, New Thought Philadelphia, the Sunshine Cathedral, Unity of Savannah, and the Om Center for Spiritual Living. Come unleash your spiritual potential with New Thought Media Network. Please help us say thank you to all of our organizational sponsors, including the Hepperlin Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, New Thought Philadelphia, Center for Spiritual Living United Life, Sunshine Cathedral, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, One Heart Retreats, Universal Joy Center, Unity Kitchener, Unity Spiritual Center, Ottawa, Om Center for Spiritual Living, Satya Center, Begin Within Ministries, Center for Spiritual Living, North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, and the Center for Spiritual Living, Seattle, as well as all of our individual donors. On behalf of New Thought Media Network, thank you, and please like, share, and subscribe. New Thought Media Network, come be you. New Thought Media Network proudly presents the Science of Mind Saturday Conversations. Learn more about the Science of Mind philosophy, faith, and way of life. Join our team of experts for a weekly deep dive discussion. Come study the Science of Mind, chapter by chapter, and resources from the Science of Mind archives. Plan to join us every Saturday, 9 a.m. Mountain Time, only on the New Thought Media Network.
Free my mind, open my heart with the whispers of truth, to live a conscious life, to live a conscious life on the growing edge. On the growing edge.
And now, here's Allie.
Welcome back. I'm here with my guest, Reverend Joy Fletcher. Joy, before we get to talking about rituals and maybe even I wanted to bring up, sometimes there can be some challenging family dynamics, at end of life, and that might affect those rituals and memorials and funerals and such. Before we get to that, I want to talk about a little bit. I've been preparing for this while we were on our break to see what I wanted to say. My mother, I was with my mother on that last day, and I was helping her get ready for bed, and I was wheeling her on her walker. She could walk, but at night she was a bit unsteady, and so she was sitting on her walker, and I was behind her in front of the bathroom mirror, and she had a sudden heart attack. And so I actually saw her and me in the mirror as this occurred. And since then, at the moment, there was complete shock, and that's a story for another time. But see, it drew me right down that memory. But as I have moved past in time since that day, it's been a month right now, I keep on seeing that image replay. And so my question, or the thing I'd like to explore a little bit, is when you're with a loved one that makes their transition with you in the room, and that may or may not be traumatic. It was for me, but it was also felt like a very high, holy, sacred moment. And so as much as there's sort of this mix of great, honor, I feel a great privilege to have been in that moment with her. There's also the physical shock, the memories that occur. I would imagine it's somewhat like PTSD. There's, you go into that place, maybe when you're by yourself, or, in sudden moments, you relive that moment again and again. And can you address that for those that might have experienced that, or maybe there's someone in their family that was with a loved one when they passed away, and how that impacts?
Well, some people have mentioned to me how they can't remove that image in their mind. And because I'm not a licensed counselor, I don't feel competent enough to talk about the psychology of it and things like that. And yet I could suggest, that maybe they want to go to a grief counselor. Yeah, and that I felt comfortable doing that. If it kept them from sleeping, sometimes I would gently suggest maybe they want to see their physician for, a prescription for, temporary. As I'm speaking, I've never suggest this in hospice. Maybe someone would like to explore something like hypnosis or something. Also prayer work. And sometimes that feeling, that vision softens over time. And shock can really create that emotional pain. And I think the important thing is not to deny it. And for some people that say they keep seeing it over and over, that sometimes if then they're not denying that they're feeling that, but they turn their attention to something else. They'll replace that with maybe a memory of their loved one or somewhere that's comforting to them, like being in the mountains or standing at a lake, things like that. And some people say that that's very soothing to them.
Yeah, that, as you were sharing those things, I definitely could feel it for myself. Like some of those things I might want to explore, but I can also see this true with other people that I've sat with. So many thoughts are coming my way as you talk to about this. For me, when this occurred and the emergency people showed up, and I was pleasantly surprised that also, and I was in Reno, Nevada at the time, there was a group of grief specialists that showed up as well, that were there to sit with me, and my sister and her son came, and they asked us a lot of, making a lot of invitations for us to and at the time you're not quite in that place to maybe take full advantage of such a service or such a blessing. And I know for me personally, I spent the next few weeks outreaching to my personal therapist and working with her, which was extremely helpful in, like you talked about, reframing, or not reframing, but bringing in other, visual aids to support with that experience. And the importance of that, guided imagery was very helpful, and prayer. Luckily, I have a lot of minister friends, and so we definitely spent time there, because I find there's an impulse for some to want to talk about what happened, and that's fresh for a while, a week or two maybe, and then the need to actually talk about what happened diminishes, and then there's a better sort of moment for some of these services or some of these rituals or activities that can support one in reframing in the way of rewriting the story of what happened with a more spiritually themed energy about it. And so I'd like to touch on, for me, my sisters and I and our families were very involved, and not everyone was on the same page. There had been some breakdowns in communications over the years that this my mother being ill brought us together, and so we weren't really prepared to be together, but now we're together. And so I'm sure you've seen this within your practice, that someone's illness brings family members together that maybe aren't as close as they'd wish to be. So what would you say to individuals that to think about, to consider for themselves when there is strained relationships within the family and you are brought together by someone's illness or passing?
Well, sometimes it's a happy ending. The family comes together and they draw close. And sometimes it seems to heighten the fracture. And that can be expressed in many ways, legal, arguing over this or that. And really, to me, it speaks to unspoken words, missed opportunities. So sometimes, as I mentioned, like the letter writing can heal, facilitate some healing. And I also encourage individuals, if when they talk to me about being really upset about family dynamics, is that, well, you can't change that other person. All you are responsible for is how you feel emotionally, and how are you going to face this and walk through this. Because I emphasize, you walk through it. It's very important to not slap a prayer on it or meditation and think it's going to magically dissipate. I don't think we're wired that way. I think it's important to own your feelings, ranging from being very sad and tearful, and also angry and frustrated, and all of that is it can be part of the grief journey. And sometimes those are worked through. They call that anticipatory grief before someone dies. So you're anticipating the changes, you're observing the changes in your loved one, family, and the family dynamics and such, that sometimes a person will have reached a place of acceptance and a level of peace by the time their loved one crosses over. I've seen individuals seem to wait until the whole family comes to the bedside before they cross over. I think that's a beautiful gift and an opportunity and a profound message, coming together. And I think that sometimes a funeral helps that, to bring people together, because it's very sacred. Whenever I officiate a service, I want to personalize it. So I bring the family together beforehand. Tell me about your mother. What do you remember? And then sometimes I'll add something that they'll share a humorous story, or something that they worked through, but not belabor the negativity and things like that, what they learned from that individual. So that can really help. And now, in the last few decades or so, I've noticed that more people choose to share something in part of that service. I, as officiant, will start the service, and then there's a point where, well, I'll say something like, everyone has had their own relationship with so and so, and you may view it this way and you may view it this way, and now I invite other people to share what they, their memories or their impressions. And it's interesting to watch the energy shift as a result of that. And there may be hugs that hadn't happened before and things like that. So
that's beautiful. We were talking before the episode began, and I was mentioning to you that this is my final podcast, my final show before I take a break. And I thought it was significant that I'm ending with joy. And so I would love you to share any messages with our listeners about your thoughts about joy and the death, the dying, and everything that surrounds it, the rituals, the memorials, the funerals, and what can you leave with us today in regards to ending this conversation with joy? And from your years of experience of seeing what really matters, in life.
Yes.
And for those that are left after. And then we'll share a little bit about how people can get in touch with you and and then I want to leave a little goodbye message for my listeners. So what joy would you like to leave our listeners with today?
I remember something taken out of Mitch Albom's, Tuesdays with Maury. And there's a line that Maury quoted saying that death does not end a relationship. All the love, all the experiences, all the memories that you shared is always with you. And then I, as Joy, suggest that we may want to give to one another the gifts that we maybe regret we didn't give to our loved one. Maybe call more often our friends, enjoy our life more, don't take things for granted, notice the beautiful moments that are present consistently. And the secret about that is, or the trick to that is, the more you notice, the more there is to be grateful for and to feel that joy. And by the way, when I was younger, I didn't like that my name was Joy because I felt there was a responsibility to practice joy, and I always didn't feel that way. But the older I get, and the more I appreciate it, and the sacredness of that name that's also an adjective.
Yeah. And something that I've always felt was important after losing my son and my mother was that I could be a living legacy and continue to share those things that I appreciated in them, adopt those as my own characteristics. My son was very helpful. He would always be the first to volunteer. I've kind of taken that on too. My mother was always, a big light in the room, and me being an introvert, that's not necessarily my vibe. But I'm processing that. Like, how can I be a greater light or a greater joy in the rooms? Yeah. So how can people work with you or find out more about you? Where can they connect with you?
Thank you. Through my website, joyful2lscircle.org. Also, the email is joyfulcircle8, the number 8, at gmail.com.
Okay. So again, that was joyful with 2 L's, circle.com.
.org.
.org, excuse me.
That's
.org.
right.
Yeah. Well, Joy, it has really been a great joy being with you today. And I look forward to seeing you again at Unity Village, probably in October.
Yes.
When we're there, there's the website, joyfulcircle.org. And thank you so much for being on my podcast, Growing Edge Live. And I wanted to invite you to share about your podcast, Divine Science Everywhere.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Myself and 2 of my colleagues, Bishop Durrell Watkins, as well as Reverend Jeff Radcliffe, gather together on Friday afternoons on New Thought Media Network. And the name of our podcast is Divine Science Everywhere. And we interview other New Thought leaders and other interesting guests, because we believe that divine science, or the omnipresence of God, the good, love, presence, power, wisdom, is everywhere present, and it isn't just confined to one system of belief. So it's at 4 p.m. on Fridays, 4 p.m. Eastern. And also, the broadcasts are available on YouTube. Make sure you put Divine Science Everywhere. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and many, many blessings as you stepped into the next chapter of your life. Thank you for inviting me today.
Thank you, Joy. Peace and blessings to you. And everyone that is listening and or watching, this will be my final episode for now. I will be back. I'm going to take some time to just be present with my own feelings around all that has gone on in my world. Personally, at the Satya Center, we are wrapping things up and retiring the ministry. And so I'm going to be taking the next few weeks, months maybe, to wrap things up and start the new chapter of my life and the work that I'm doing with my partner, Diana Soroka, and the book that we are authoring, Her Wings Appeared. So stay tuned. Big thanks for being here, for watching, whether this is your first episode that you've watched or listened to, or whether you are a regular here. I'm so honored to have held this space at the Growing Edge, and to introduce you to so many amazing, wonderful beings throughout the last almost 3 years now. Can't believe it. That we've been doing this podcast on New Thought Media Network. I'm really grateful that you've been here. I hope that you found some inspiration, something helpful and useful that you've heard through these conversations. And finally, I'd love to say thank you to my producer, Michael Mangus. And why don't you come on with me for a moment, Michael? There he is. There's my producer, Michael. Thank you so much for being a part of Growing Edge Live. It's been such a joy to work with you, to have all of these conversations that you've been part of with me for 3 years now, and to Robert Brzezinski, who is the founder of New Thought Media Network. Both of you have been such a joy and a delight, and all of the other broadcasters that offer a show on this network, the other ministers, the other authors and leaders and speakers and gurus that are a part of New Thought Media Network, and the organizations that sponsor. It's been wonderful to be a part.
Yes, thank you, Allie. It's been a joy working with you, and the best is yet to come.
It's true. And
All
we
right.
end with
Thank
Joy.
you.
And thank you for you, Joy. And thank you for Michael. Thank you for everyone. But most importantly, thank you to my listeners. Peace and blessings on your journey. Always end with joy.
Free my mind, open my heart with the whispers of truth. To live a conscious life, to live a conscious life on the growing edge.